A dream wedding in Italy, a relationship that seemed solid, a future that looked completely locked in. And then, just 5 weeks before they were supposed to say, "I do," everything reportedly fell apart. Dak Prescott and Sarah Jane Ramos were supposed to be heading toward one of the happiest moments of their lives. Instead, they are now at the center of one of the most talked about celebrity relationship stories right now. Because when a wedding gets called off this close to the date, people do not just wonder what happened, they wonder what could have gone so wrong that walking away felt easier than walking down the aisle. From the outside, Dak Prescott and Sarah Jane Ramos did not look like a couple on shaky ground. They looked like two people already building a real life together. They had a family, a future, and what appeared to be a serious commitment that had already moved far beyond a normal celebrity romance. Reports even said they were planning a wedding in Italy, which only made the relationship feel even more picture-perfect. That is exactly why this story hit so hard the moment the breakup reports surfaced. This was not just another celebrity split. This was the collapse of something that seemed real, serious, and almost complete. And when something that close to forever suddenly falls apart, the public does not just see heartbreak, they see mystery, tension, and the uncomfortable question nobody can stop asking: what happened in those final weeks? What has been widely reported is this: Dak Prescott and Sarah Jane Ramos allegedly called off their engagement around 5 weeks before their planned wedding in Italy, and that detail alone is enough to make this story explode. 5 weeks is not early uncertainty. 5 weeks is when the plans are real, the pressure is real, and the future feels almost unavoidable. What is also striking is the tone surrounding the early reports. This was not immediately framed as a messy public scandal full of screaming accusations and online chaos. Instead, it was described more like a heartbreaking emotional split, the kind that suggests something serious had reached a breaking point behind the scenes. And then came another important layer. Reports also suggested the two still planned to focus on co-parenting. That instantly changed the story from simple breakup gossip into something far more emotional. Because this is not a clean ending. This is the kind of ending where the relationship may be over, but the connection between them does not just disappear. There is something uniquely dramatic about a breakup that happens before a wedding, but after the promise of forever has already been made. Dating is one thing, engagement is another. Once a couple gets engaged, the public no longer sees them as just figuring things out. People assume the decision has already been made. They assume the doubts are gone, the foundation is strong, and the future is set. That is why hearing that a wedding was called off just 5 weeks before the ceremony feels so much bigger than a normal breakup headline. At that point, the emotional investment is massive. Families are involved, plans are in motion, dreams have already been built around the event. Add in the luxury image of an Italian wedding, and suddenly the whole thing feels even more cinematic. This was supposed to be a glamorous beginning. Instead, it is turned into a public ending, and that contrast is exactly why people cannot look away. At first, this story sounded tragic. Then it started sounding dramatic. Once reports of the split surfaced, gossip coverage quickly began circling around possible behind-the-scenes tension, including speculation about a major argument tied to pre-wedding celebrations and trips in the Bahamas. And the moment a breakup story gets attached to one possible final incident, public fascination grows even faster. Because people love the idea that every collapse has one last spark, one final fight, one moment where everything suddenly became impossible to ignore. But this is also where the line between reporting and rumor becomes critical. The breakup itself has been widely discussed. The exact reason for it has not been fully explained by Dak Prescott or Sarah Jane Ramos in public detail. And when the people at the center stay quiet, the internet does what it always does. It fills the silence with theories, assumptions, and drama. That is how private heartbreak becomes a public obsession almost overnight. This is where the story becomes deeper than celebrity gossip, because when people hear that a wedding was canceled only weeks before the ceremony, they immediately imagine something explosive: betrayal, a secret, a devastating argument, a shocking revelation. But real relationships often fall apart much more quietly than that. Sometimes what looks sudden from the outside has actually been building for months behind closed doors. Sometimes couples keep moving forward not because everything is fine, but because they're trying desperately to make it fine. They keep planning, they keep hoping, they keep convincing themselves that the tension can still be fixed if they just hold on a little longer. And then, eventually, they reach a moment where they realize they're no longer moving toward happiness, they're simply moving toward a wedding date. If that is what happened here, then this was not one dramatic surprise. It was the painful final moment in a relationship that may have already been under pressure for much longer than anyone realized. This story has everything that pulls people into celebrity drama and keeps them there. First, it involves a major public figure, which means interest was always going to be high. Second, it has the structure of a broken fairy tale. People are naturally drawn to stories that appear to be heading toward a perfect ending before suddenly collapsing at the edge of the finish line. But the biggest reason this story is spreading so hard is the mystery. There is no full explanation, no complete timeline, no single statement that neatly answers every question. And the moment there's a gap between what happened and what the public knows, fascination multiplies. People want to know whether this was mutual. They want to know whether there was one final fight. They want to know whether the relationship had quietly been unraveling long before the world noticed. And most of all, they want to know whether the truth is simpler, sadder, or much messier than anyone is being told.
One detail makes this story feel more painful than a typical celebrity breakup, and that is the reported focus on co-parenting. Because that means this is not just about a romance ending. It is about two people trying to navigate heartbreak while still remaining permanently connected through family. And that changes everything. In many celebrity breakups, once it is over, both people can step away, disappear, and rebuild separately. That is not what this sounds like. Here, the end of the engagement does not erase the emotional bond, the history, or the responsibilities that remain. It simply forces the relationship into a new form, and that is often even harder than a clean breakup. A canceled wedding is already painful, but a canceled wedding between two people who still have to stay connected adds a completely different layer of emotional weight. It turns this from gossip into something more human, more complicated, and in some ways, much sadder. One of the most fascinating rules of celebrity drama is that silence can sometimes create more noise than conflict. When famous couples break up and immediately start posting, reacting, blaming, or leaking details, the public gets a storyline fast. But when the people involved stay quiet, measured, or emotionally restrained, the story actually grows bigger. Because then every unanswered question becomes irresistible. Every missing detail starts to feel meaningful. Every rumor sounds possible. And that appears to be exactly what is happening here. The official picture remains limited, a painful split, a wedding that is no longer happening, and a continuing commitment to co-parenting. But around those facts is a growing cloud of speculation about what really happened, whether there was one final turning point, and whether this breakup was truly sudden or simply the last visible crack in a relationship that had already been struggling in private. And maybe that is exactly why this story has resonated so strongly. Because a canceled wedding is never just about a canceled event. It's about the future people imagined, the promises that felt real, and the devastating moment when two people realized that staying together may no longer lead where they once believed it would. So what do you think really happened here? Do you believe this was one explosive last-minute collapse, or do you think the relationship had been quietly falling apart long before the wedding was ever called off? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more deep-dive celebrity drama stories with all the emotion, tension, and layers behind the headlines, make sure to subscribe. Because sometimes the biggest stories are not the ones with the clearest answers, but the ones hiding the most behind the silence.